part of my goal with what I want to talk to you about today is really exploring this unseen world of energy that how it works, how it affects us, and probably even more importantly, how we can actually directly influence it so that for the betterment for our health and for our own lives. And you've probably come across some different terms already, whether you've heard things like coherence or incoherence or scalar energy, electromagnetic frequencies. And some of you might be really familiar with that stuff already. Other times I find like they get a little bit confusing and it's hard to understand what we're actually doing with it. So in today's lecture, I really want to break down some of that stuff so that we have a clear understanding of these concepts around energy and how we interact with them and how they actually affect us. And we did a whole series a while back on the podcast that was called Energy Frequency Magnetic, what was it? Energy Frequency, Vibration and Magnetics, the Next Era of Healthcare. And we did that one a few years ago. And it was brilliant. I love the guests that we had on there. But we had one fellow who had healed himself from chest down paralysis, and he had had a pretty awakening experience in that process. He was in a deep coma and actually came out of it. And when he came out of it, he knew exactly what he needed to heal his own body. And one of the things in one of the interviews we had with him is he said, we think we know what we know because it's all based on what we see with the perceived senses, with our five senses. And he said, of the greater reality, all of this unseen world that impacts us, he said, we know 0.03% of the greater reality. He said, we know nothing. And all of this other stuff can directly influence us, can influence our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And what I want to show you today is that we can actually impact that greater reality, all of the stuff that we can't see, very powerfully. And that's what we're going to go through today. One of the fun things too is that the people that are using their biomodulator and transducer, you're going to be exposed throughout these types of conferences, lots of different ways that you can utilize this equipment. And I actually feel like we're still extrapolating and building on what is even capable of this technology. So when you look at something like the biomodulator and the transducer together, you've got this really unique blend of being able to have coherent electromagnetic frequencies that are beneficial, tied back to nature frequencies that are beneficial for your biology. But at the same point with the transducer, you are able to generate these structured, coherent scalar waves. And this is what opens up an entirely new platform of being able to address our well-being. And that's kind of what the essence of this concept of still point scalar repatterning is. We're actually going to be tapping into the source blueprint, that vis medicatrix naturae that we talk about in naturopathic medicine, that natural healing ability. And then we want to spread that throughout our entire biofield. So let me first just go through my medical disclaimer here that this information presented in this webinar is intended for educational uses only and informational purposes. It's not medical advice and should not be used as a substitute for seeing a physician or a professional diagnosis, treatment, or care from a qualified healthcare provider. I'm not speaking to you today as a naturopathic doctor or an osteopath. I'm not diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. If you have or suspect that you have a medical condition, always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health professional. Participation in this webinar and any related activities is voluntary, and you are solely responsible for any decisions you make regarding your health and wellness. Just part of the legal stuff that we have to do nowadays when we share what I think to be incredibly valuable information around anything to do with health. So I like to often start off any of these lectures around what if healing doesn't require more effort, just more coherence? And I would even extrapolate that to what if life doesn't require more effort, just more coherence? And we're going to unpack what that means when I talk about coherence as we go along through here. But we often adapt a very young approach to healing. We're usually out really trying to figure out how to do it and what's going to work, and I got to do, and really figure it all out. And that can be really beneficial up until a point. But at the end of the day, I find usually when I see real quantum shifts in healing, when I see the spontaneous healing that can occur, it almost always happens when that yang approach subsides and there's more of a yin approach, more of and when I'm saying yang and yin based in Chinese medicine, a yin approach is more where there's a surrender, there's a letting go, there's a connecting back to something that is more powerful than what the conscious mind is capable of. That's ultimately where real, genuine healing stems from. And that's what we're wanting to connect to and inform us. So, as many of you know, we live in a sea of frequency. We've often heard that everything is frequency, vibration, and energy. And scalar fields are this really unique thing that's kind of come onto the scene. I mean, they've been here forever, but we haven't really even known too much about them and really spoken about them as far as what their potential is until fairly recently. When we think of energy, we're often thinking of electromagnetic frequencies, and these are called Hertzian waves, electromagnetic frequencies. They kind of move in a certain direction, they radiate outwards, they can be measured physically in hertz, and they tend to get weaker as they travel more distance. Just think of like a radio wave where the farther you go, it starts to get more and more scattered and weaker. And they primarily transmit energy. That's kind of like a Hertzian wave. But scalar waves are something very different. Are You can't measure them directly. There's no frequency associated with them. They don't exist like that. They exist as potential fields. They're fields of infinite potential that's everywhere, all around us. Kind of like when you think about the air that's around us everywhere we go. That would be what a scalar field would be like. They don't radiate outwards. They're everywhere at all times. They're kind of omnipotent. And they don't decay over distance, and they can actually move through and penetrate matter with very little loss at all. And I think one of the key things is that rather than energy, they transmit information. And what we're going to learn is that information that gets transmitted is incredibly important. And often what we don't realize in this unseen world is that we are actually bombarded by information that is not actually beneficial for us. And we have to consciously change that. And I think when we think about these worlds of energy and frequency and vibration and fields, our bodies will actually create the chemistry that's based on the coherence or incoherence of the field. And so you know this directly if you are exposed to something that creates a mass amount of fear in your body. We create hormones and neurotransmitters, and we create the biology of fear in our bodies very quickly, like that. Literally, it takes place. And the same thing when we have that first, you can almost feel it when you first got that feeling of falling head over heels in love, or if you have kids and you saw I almost get well up thinking about it when I think about the birth of my own child. When I was there, the feelings that come up, you get flooded with those neurochemistry of coherence. And that impacts your body in many ways that we're going to talk about. And it's important to remember that our bodies respond to fields, not just chemicals. It's actually the fields that often will create the chemicals that our own natural pharmacy will create. And that our field is constantly being shaped by the frequencies around us. So it makes us think, what is the modern scalar field landscape like? What are we living in? What are we literally being immersed in on a regular basis? This is where it's very important to pay attention to our environments and both our external and our internal environments. So scalar potential is everywhere. And I'm going to just break that down a little bit for people because I think that gets a little bit confusing sometimes when we think about scalar energy. And so scalar potential is everywhere, all around us, okay? But on its own, it's neutral. It doesn't really do anything. It has to become structured. And the primary influencer of structure is information. So as soon as you put information into the field, you've started to structure it, okay? And that information could be beneficial or could not be beneficial. And when we look at today's world, most of the information that's being put into the field is not actually very beneficial. It actually creates a lot of coherence. So I think of it like this kind of as an analogy. Think of an orchestra, and the orchestra itself, with all of the different musicians and all the different instruments, could be like the scalar potential. There's the potential for an infinite number of things to take place. They could play just about any type of music, just about any note that they want to, but unless something is put in front of them, it just sits there. So the sheet music could be more like the information. Once that sheet music comes, that's giving them the instructions on what to do. And then the conductor can be more like the organizer of everything. They're the one that actually creates the coherence. They make sure that everybody plays on time and the tempo's right and it's rhythmic and harmonic and the melody comes through. And that's what can make noise turn into something that's beautiful. Now, often the conductor that's going on in the world around us is not necessarily running coherence. It's often running more incoherence. So when we look at the things that affect it, like electromagnetic pollution, stress, fear-driven media, environmental incoherence, all of these things create a incoherence in our field and a destructuring process. I shouldn't say destructuring, it creates incoherence in our field. It's still information that structures the field, but it's structuring it with negative information that's not beneficial for us. And I would say that the biggest sources of incoherence right now that we're usually dealing with are electromagnetic frequencies. Electromagnetic frequencies create a very pulsed, agitated signal that disrupts our biofield. It also drowns out subtle energetic communication. The mass media and thought forms, these imprint the field with fear, distraction, and discordant collective resonance. There's a lot of emotional turbulence, both inside ourselves as well as from others. So unprocessed stress, conflict, all of these things radiate chaotic signals into our body's biofield. When you think of things even like toxins in our environment, pollutants in the air, these things all create also unstructured water. That's another whole big topic I'll probably talk about one day, but the water and the structuring process of water is actually essential because it's the primary medium that carries clear light or biophotonic and scalar information throughout our body. And when the biofield is being disrupted, whether that's through electromagnetic frequencies or a number of other things that can disrupt the structure of water, that makes it hard for us to carry a signal and allow that message to transmit throughout our whole body and through our biofield. We also have a lot of psychospiritual disconnection, and there's a lot of chaotic collective environments, whether in cities or online spaces. So together, all of these different sources of incoherence have a tendency to sort of break apart our energy field, and our energy circulation slows or stalls, leaving us in survival mode, and we tend to lose coherence on all levels of the biofield: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Now, it's estimated that right now on the planet, we are probably have about 80 to 90% of incoherent information that we are dealing with compared to coherent information. And just think about that. If you look in general of the amount of, electromagnetic frequencies are a big deal. They play into a lot of different pieces, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment on how I think it's affecting us as well. But electromagnetic frequencies, toxicity that's in the air and the water, the degree of just fear and anxiety and stress that's in the world weighs much heavier than the pieces that create more coherence, which can be like intention, having a loving and appreciative intention, like Scott talked about with the gratitude. That's a powerful way to create coherence. Inner stillness is one of the most powerful ways to actually ripple out a very strong coherent signal into our biofield. And then scalar energy technologies that also help to structure the scalar potential and infuse it with coherence. There's not nearly as much of that as there is the incoherent information at this time. And so when that's going on, our biofield starts to become chaotic. And incoherent fields confuse our cellular communication. I think this is one of the most important points to take home around this in regards to how incoherence affects us. Incoherent fields confuse our cellular communication. So in cellular communication, you got to think this is trillions of cells in our body that need to have accurate communication. When that gets disrupted, that communication is lost. Think of that in any relationship you have. If you have poor communication in a relationship with your partner, are you going to have a healthy relationship with that partner? Are you going to have a healthy marriage? If you have poor communication with your kids, what's going to happen? It's no different than what happens on a cellular communication within our body. It's just that now we're dealing with trillions of different individual cells. When that gets disrupted, we starts to impact healing. Basically, coherent signals creates order, harmony, resonance. When that stuff is not there, healing's going to start to get disrupted. And what I think is really fascinating is in the research, you're starting to see this, well, and this has been happening for a while, but I think it's just coming up because more research is being done on it. But we look at how this incoherence in the field is affecting migratory birds and bees, even as well as dolphins and whales. And take, for example, something like the European robin. And the European robin has this really cool quantum-based magnetic compass that's located in its eyes. And it's all through this protein called cryptochrome. And it uses that to orientate itself against the Earth's magnetic field to figure out where it is in space. And what they found is that even low-level electromagnetic frequencies, like we're talking like in the kilohertz up to maybe 5 megahertz, has been found to create profound disorientation in their navigation abilities. And that's really important when you start to think, okay, we're up at like 5G now, going into 6G, whatever this even means. But it's like when you look at the megahertz, 5G starts at 600 megahertz and can go upwards to about 40,000 megahertz. And we're seeing very similar types of things with bees as well. I mean, we actually live out here and have kind of like almost a bit of a hobby farm and a garden, and we had honeybees. And my wife and I even noticed weird behavior with the bees. And then talking to even local beekeepers, they found very similar things. And I really feel like this is a big part of this is from the mass amounts of EMF that our bodies are being bombarded with. But what they found in the research is that even with honeybees, it's affecting their olfactory learning. So they have a hard time actually discerning what is food. And it even starts to affect their homing and navigation abilities as well. I've seen sometimes where I remember my wife and I looking once at a honeybee on a flower, and it just looked like it didn't even know where it was. It looked confused, and it wasn't even doing what it was supposed to be doing. And we had this conversation. Then later, I actually started to research it and find some of this information. So why I'm saying that is because most people, we live immersed in field-based noise that we can't see. A lot of times we can't even feel it completely, but it's affecting how we are living our lives. It's affecting how we view the world. It affects the choices that we make. It affects our physical health in so many different ways. Our biofield is our natural information network. It links cells, organs, thoughts, and spirit to our source blueprint, to that original vis medicatrix naturae, that natural healing ability, that source information, however you want to describe it. The biofield links all of this stuff together. And so when we are bombarded by this, we end up with a fragmented field. We should have this nice, even, coherent, harmonic, resonant field around us, and it just starts to become distorted. And when you talk to people that can actually see energy, that's what they see. They see this distortion in it. They see black marks throughout it and all of these different pieces. And these distortions affect all the layers of the biofield, the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. We get disrupted energy flow, nervous system dysregulation. Voltage will always start to go down when we run into dysfunctions in the biofield. And it creates that impaired communication in the biofield. And it totally makes me think of that telephone game. Do you remember playing as a kid where you would whisper something in someone's ear and it would go around the circle, and by the time it came back, it had nothing to do with what the original message was. Totally different. So I got to make the analogy. It's like the message should be healing now, but by the time it gets around, it feels like feeling foul or sealing cow or something totally abstract that makes no sense. This is what I think is starting to happen in people's biofields. this information, this message that we are supposed to have from that natural healing ability is getting so distorted that it's making it very difficult for our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual parts of who we are to access it. And we need to be able to access it because that is really where health begins. And if we're not accessing health from that place, we are always going to be at a bit of a disadvantage, and we're always going to be working against something. And what we see generally in our lives, we feel fatigued, we feel anxious, we have lack of clarity. How many people nowadays have more brain fog and mental fog? I mean, these are connected to a number of different things, but these are just en masse proportions. A lot of people just feel disconnected from themselves, from something larger than themselves, and incoherence has a way of rippling out. It's contagious. And think about that. If I'll often see this where I use the example like if you go into a subway and you're there and everything seems okay, and then a really dodgy character comes in that kind of feels threatening, you feel the entire field changes almost instantaneously in that subway car, very quickly. That's how quickly that stuff can move. Now, at the same point, that can also happen through coherence. If you're around someone that holds an incredibly powerful, calming presence, that can ripple out through the entire field as well. So the areas that get affected from incoherence, physically, disrupted cellular signaling, nervous system imbalance, and energy inefficiency. Mentally, we start to see reduced clarity and focus, poor adaptability, just overwhelm and overload. Emotionally, there's usually mood instability, overreactivity, usually lots of anxiety that's going on or restless energy that's in the body all the time. And spiritually or existentially, just disconnection from something large in ourselves, disconnection from source, and loss of coherence in meaning. Meaning is a powerful, coherent signal. So the first part of this really goes through kind of what's going on in the bigger picture. But what I want to bring it back to is what can we actually do about it? Because this is where things get really exciting. And so it's important to remember that coherence is a much stronger signal than incoherence. And coherence itself is self-reinforcing. It's almost like there's a tendency we want to be coherent. That's actually like nature is coherent and we are connected to nature. One way to create coherence is to go immerse yourself in nature. You know, even things like the biomodulator and transducer actually integrate frequencies that you would find in nature that transmit through that. It's one of the ways that it creates coherence. But we are very much connected to nature. So coherence is part of who we are. Incoherence is actually more distortion. And what's interesting to note is that you can have a small group that's strongly coherent, and that can actually outweigh large amounts of incoherence in our environment. I remember studying the work of Dr. David Hawkins for a long time, and if you haven't, he wrote a book called Power versus Force and a number of other books, and he really was looking at the power of consciousness and consciousness fields as being attractor fields in our world. And he kind of gave them a numerical value. Basically, anything over 200 was pro-life and supportive, where anything under 200 was more detrimental to life. And he would give examples of people that have been throughout societies that have stepped into very powerful fields of consciousness, where they've actually influenced millions of people and actually had a massive impact on the entire planet because of the power of their state of consciousness that raised the level of the sea for everyone. So we have a tendency to want to go into coherence. And for incoherence to persist, you have to pump tons of energy into maintaining incoherence. This is also why when we are in a state of chronic stress all the time, it's completely catabolic. It breaks us down. It's an energy-driven pathway to really maintain that sort of state. It's wearing on the body. And when we see that in the environment, the same thing. You've got to be on a pattern of pumping out a lot of fear to keep people in that state, because when that starts to settle back down, it doesn't take long for us to go back into coherence if we can connect back to a coherent signal. So Stillness and intention are some of the more powerful ways to restore coherence, and then incorporating field-based practices can repattern the entire biofield and correct things. This is what we're going to actually practice in a little bit. And what's really cool is that rather than just receiving healing, we ourselves become a broadcaster for healing around us. When we embody this, we don't only heal ourselves, but we actually transmit that to everyone else. So I think about this, the coherence has this ability to take incoherence, and which is like this noise, I almost picture when if you've ever been to a symphony and you hear them tuning, when they're tuning their instruments, and it just sounds like all sorts of noise, and then all of a sudden the conductor steps up and tap tap and starts, and just boom, converts instantly from sort of chaos sounds of all sorts of mismatched sounds to something beautiful and melodious. So, from my perspective, energetic hygiene is a new necessity that we really need to take seriously and we have to incorporate daily because we are exposed daily to incoherence, and this requires a conscious counterbalance. We need to be able to flood our field with coherence. So practices that clear, stabilize, and replenish our biofield with coherent information are essential because without it, we are going to be more susceptible to chaos on the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual levels. We're going to have miscommunication, and that's going to create all sorts of downstream problems. When we are more structured with coherence, we actually create more resilience, more clarity, and more vitality. We can actually go out into the world and deal with the level of incoherences there much better than if we're not doing these types of practices. And not only that, I actually believe that at a certain point, we absolutely transmute the incoherence as we move around. We become this beacon for coherence. So you literally can go into places and change the situation. You can change something that could be incoherent, and actually just through your presence even there, you start to create a change in the field. So some of the more powerful tools for energetic hygiene that we can use, practices that incorporate stillness and silence, and I will speak more about that shortly. To me, this pause, this stillness is the portal that gets us in to that information that we want to move through the biofield. Heart-focused breathing has been long used for showing that it's a very powerful way to create heart-brain coherence, which stabilizes the autonomic nervous system. Collective intention, group coherence projects. This has also a way of amplifying. So you can become very powerful on your own, but then when you connect people up together, all in a coherent place, you amplify that message substantially. These localized scalar fields actually connect through the unified field and go much larger. And you can tap into even deeper levels of, I think, coherence and information. Very powerful to get people together. And then scalar technologies. I've mentioned this before, I feel like some of the beneficial technologies that we see on the planet right now, things like the biomodulator and the transducer, I feel like these are really powerful bridging technologies at the moment. And I feel like we are going through a transition where I've always felt that whatever we see in technology, we are capable of doing on our own. I feel like the powers within the human being are so much, and we have barely even tapped the surface of it. And where I think the role of most beneficial technologies are is that they actually help to facilitate that within ourselves. So that when we are using some of these technologies to sort of amplify the effects, it helps us entrain to that and almost remind ourselves, we remember again how to do it on our own. And then the technologies amp up even more so that they get even to the next level of our evolution as a species. And so the biomodulator and transducer on their own to combine can create a powerful structured, coherent scalar field. And that's all done through the mechanisms of the transducer and using like a Tesla coil, the incorporation of certain crystal geometry, and then the frequencies that are being emitted in it. So where that kind of technology can be really beneficial is that, yes, we can absolutely create scalar fields on our own. The human body can, and we've done studies with that. You can create, through consciousness, you can create structured scalar fields. You can also create scalar fields through physics. And so technologies like these are creating a structured scalar field that we can use. Why I think that's really powerful right now is because when we are in pain, when we are stressed, when we are feeling overwhelmed or burdened with emotions, if we're just burnt out, it's hard for us to generate a powerful, scalar, coherent field on our own. Sometimes we need a little assistance. And so technologies like this can actually give us a big head start so that we can create that field, and then we can just sort of drop into it and get the benefits from it. And then the other tool that I think is incredibly valuable and that we should all be incorporating is nature. Nature has beautiful geometry within it that naturally structures the scalar fields with coherence. And you feel it when you're in nature. And in the old days, in a lot of indigenous cultures would say if you've done everything you could to heal and you still weren't healing, they would literally send you out into the jungle or into the forest and let nature heal you and sort of just be immersed in nature. So still point scalar repatterning is a way of combining a couple of these powerful concepts and bringing them together. So the still point, and I may go over this a couple times just so it really lands, but the still point originally was an osteopathic term. And as an osteopathic practitioner, when we are working with a patient, we are often dialoguing with the body in a way that creates what's called a still point. And so usually you're gently working with the body and sort of facilitating parameters of like flexion, extension, side bending, rotation, compression, distraction, different things like this to find usually a quiet area, almost like where the body wants to kind of rest in. And in that space, we then hold it very gently, and the body stays there. And what happens is, as you're holding that space, there's a profound quietness that starts to happen. And you feel it in your hands. The patient feels it. I feel it as a practitioner. You actually feel like it's in the entire space. It's really quite beautiful. And there's this, and what happens in the body is that there's actually a cessation of the movement of cerebral spinal fluid, of the cranial sacral system. It actually slows right down. Everything goes quiet. And then you stay in that quietness for a period of time. Depends on how long it takes. It's the process of the individual. And then all of a sudden you get this big wave of energy that comes back up and you feel it in your hands. And that is the return of that vis medicatrix naturae, that natural healing ability that we all have inherent. It's that original source blueprint. I think of it as that original blueprint of order and health that we all have. That restores back into the body, and then it starts to breathe. So it's like the body literally heals itself. We just facilitate that arriving. Now, we can actually, what I found, we can create something very similar to that type of still point, but on our own through being very still and just with intention. And this is what we're going to practice after in just a little bit. So I think of the still point as being the doorway or the portal. It's what gives you access to connecting back to that original source blueprint that we need to be able to connect back to, that is so difficult to hear the message from now because of all of the incoherence that we are bombarded with. So think of it like a doorway or a gateway into a library of infinite wisdom. But unless you open that door, you can't access what's in there. So the still point, arriving at that place of stillness in our body, is what actually allows us to access that infinite potential. And then the scalar field is what actually transmits and integrates it throughout the biofield. And when we do this in specific ways with, say, group coherence and whatnot, we can even amplify it even more. So it's almost like if you were connecting to the message without the structured scalar field, it would be like a whisper. You might have the right message, but you can't hear it very well. It's just so quiet. And if you had the scalar field, but without the stillness first, then you can get a loud message, but there's no substance to it. You need to have both happening together. So this slide, I'm kind of just reiterating around the concept of stillness and why this is so powerful. And it's our access point to that original healing blueprint. And the blueprint's not just an idea, it's an energetic template that's encoded in the field. And the body actually remembers it, and then it reorganizes everything around it. What happens is that when we connect to that, you will be informed differently than how you've currently been informed. Rather than being informed through incoherence, you're going to start to be informed by something incredibly powerful and unique to you. When you connect to this, it's your original blueprint. It's not mine. I will connect to my own. It's not the same thing for everybody. And then what comes up for you to listen to and to put into practice is going to be very different than it might be for somebody else. So when you look at the research on stillness and silence, it's fascinating. Like I said before, we often try to make this young approach to do. You know, I interviewed this one quantum physicist. I don't know if you ever watched this movie called What the Bleep Do We Know? It was an old movie. It was one of the first ones that really came out that really blew people's mind around quantum physics and how that can actually be played out in our lives and influence things. He was one of the speakers on that. He was the quantum physicist, this from India, really brilliant fellow and really sweet. He's written like a dozen books tied around this. And he said often he uses this term and he says it kind of in his way. It goes doobie 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 doo. He goes, we need to do, then we need to be. We need to do, then we need to be. He goes, some cultures are way too much do. He said, North America is usually way too much do. We just do, and we never take the time to actually be. And when he talked about the be, that was in stillness. We needed to be quiet. We need to be still because it's from that place that's when we receive the insights. That's when things slow down enough that we can connect more to an intelligence that's going to be in our highest good. Otherwise, we are really just interacting all the time with all this other stuff that's in the field. And so when you look at the research on stillness and silence, it's so powerful. I mean, you know, you couldn't package how powerful this is. It's just like when you look at the research of nature immersion. There's so many benefits to being just doing very little, you know. So literally doing nothing, being still, lowers the heart rate and blood pressure. It reduces stress and cortisol levels. Promotes hippocampal neurogenesis, so we start to remember things better. It enhances relaxation and mood, improves sleep quality, boosts focus and cognitive clarity, supports emotional processing, balances the autonomic nervous system, increases creativity, and improves sensory awareness. Pretty powerful stuff for literally doing nothing. Now, the tricky part is sometimes doing nothing is a lot harder than we think it is when we're actually used to being incredibly busy all the time. And sometimes we need to carve out space to start to actually be still and slow things down. So the structured coherent scalar fields, just to speak about it again, these things, once structured, the scalar field broadcasts and amplifies the information that is structured within it. So the information is what kind of structures the field, and then the coherence, the more coherent we can make it, which is part of the information, but also through beneficial frequencies. It can be through geometry, it can be through intention, it can be what's surrounded by the environment, like whether we're in nature, whether we're in like a busy city. These things all affect the coherence of it as well. And so as this stuff takes place, that's what's going to amplify it and move this information throughout our biofield. And I explained before, we need both. And one is not the whole picture without the other. Stillness is the original information that we want to access. The scalar coherence is what is going to broadcast it. And together, That is what allows the whole biofield to be repatterned. It's almost like picture a lot of just confusion scattered throughout your biofield. I really picture it like these migratory birds that are just, they can't connect to that signal and then they end up off path. It's like, think about it this way. If we have been so bombarded by incoherence and we're not connecting to that message that really knows how to take care of our body, um, how to live a healthy life, how to make certain decisions, how to work with our thoughts and work with our emotions, all of these things that original blueprint knows how to handle. If we haven't been connecting to that, but we've been connecting to all of this incoherence, how far off track can we end up? And if we do reconnect to that, can we just get ourselves back into alignment? And what starts to happen? It's like I feel like rather than being in the stream, we've kind of got pulled off to the side and we're stuck. And we just got to get back onto that stream of information, that then let that start to guide our next steps. So what actually happens that restores health? So when we have all of these things lined up, we get cellular reorganization. Cells entrain to a coherent field. They support optimized gene expression, protein unfolding. We get DNA repair. Field clearing, distortions, and incoherent patterns can be overwritten by the coherent scalar information, leading to literally like an energetic detox. We can restore biofield integrity. So a strong, coherent field stabilizes the biofield and it gives us more resilience. It reduces our vulnerability to incoherence, to external stressors and whatnot. We get increased systemic coherence. So all of our main systems, the nervous system, immune system, hormonal axes, resynchronize, enhancing resilience and adaptability. And we can get consciousness realignment. So this is a really powerful one. There's a lot of trauma that people have dealt with in our lives. There's a lot of emotional overlays that basically run our lives in many unconscious ways, and thought patterns and limiting beliefs. All of these things are embedded in the field. When this process, when you're doing this, when you get reinformed by the information that's in that original blueprint, that source coherence, when that reinforms the biofield and coherence spreads throughout, there's a period of time where these patterns are gone. They don't actually exist in real time. They're not there anymore. Patterns of trauma can disappear. Emotional imbalances can disappear. Limiting beliefs patterns can be gone. Now, usually what happens is that we bring them back. It's the same example I would see in clinic where you could work with somebody and you might even have found this too, even when you're using the biomodulator transducer. Say you've got a sore shoulder or a limited range of motion. I've worked with people and at the end of it, I've gotten them to move their arm and it's pain-free and it's got full range of motion. I've even seen this when we use something like biological decoding where you're trying to address the main unresolved emotional mental conflict that's behind illness. When you can find that and the person can identify it and it connects to it, all of a sudden it's like poof, it clears. And they can actually, if I'm taking an example of someone with say like a frozen shoulder, all of a sudden they can start to move their arm and they're pain-free. But I guarantee you, unless that really settles and integrates in the body, they don't believe it yet. And then they go looking for it. And eventually they start to find it again. And then it starts to settle back in. So what we want to do with this type of practice is as we keep this consciousness realignment taking place, we're constantly flooding the biofield with this coherent new information. And then, as you'll see in the process, we actually have to start to learn from it and put it into our lives so that it can actually hold. Now, something that is uniquely different, and to me, I think is probably one of the most powerful parts of this process, is that we are not just connecting to coherence. So, for example, you could immerse yourself in coherence. You could put on coherent music. You could be in coherent company. You could even use devices that create coherence, and you can benefit from that. As we talked about, you get better cell-to-cell communication. You can find that you get a sense of ease and calm in the body. The autonomic nervous system usually starts to regulate better. We've got more emotional stability. A lot of beautiful things can come from just creating more coherence in your life. And remember, because we are bombarded by incoherence, so just having coherence can be profoundly impactful. But I want to take it a step farther. I don't want just coherence. I want us to repattern our lives with that source blueprint that we came in here with, because that's when everything starts to change. And that's what really holds steady. So when we access stillness, we're not just bathing in coherence, we're tapping into that universal intelligence of life itself. And when we do that, there's several unique benefits that we can gain from this. This is that natural healing ability that we all have that has gotten kind of distorted. So we reconnect to that original blueprint where the body literally remembers its original design for health. And not just physical health, but on physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. We start to find that we get much deeper insights. We can access intuition and intuitive guidance in a much more direct way. This impacts our life direction, and we get more clarity about our choices and what to do and what not to do. We have a better sense of ourself so that we know how to interact in the world, and we actually put ourselves in the driver's seat so we don't just keep letting ourselves, almost like what Scott talked about earlier, as the caregiver, we let ourselves kind of just go down a path that's not so healthy. We learn how to actually speak up for ourselves and to take ourselves at the top of the totem pole because so much relies on that. We can start to experience transformational shifts. So this is where you get breakthroughs in behavior, relationships, worldviews can change, and we realign with authenticity. This is really powerful because at the end of the day, I'll give you an example of something like, say, forgiveness. A lot of times it's hard for people. People have gone through this life and there's been lots of things that we have taken on, that we've experienced, that sit in the biofield and just keep impacting our lives. And when we've had hurts or traumas or whatnot, and sometimes we know there's a lot of benefit in forgiveness. We know there's a lot of benefit in love and gratitude, but sometimes to access that is very difficult. When we inform the because the bottom line is that if the biofield is the same, you're not going to be able to see things differently. And if you can't see things differently, you can't have an authentic experience that's going to be different. If I can only see the color blue, I'm only going to see it as blue. But if all of a sudden I can open my vision up and I can see the different array of colors, I can actually have a different experience. So for example, with something like, say, forgiveness, maybe we know that it would be good for our bodies to be able to forgive, but we just can't genuinely do it. We don't feel it. What can happen through this type of process, when you get reinformed by this source coherence, you start to actually see things differently. Rather than the limited way that we've only seen our world, it gets expansive. And now all of a sudden we can see it through many different lenses. And often that's where we can have an organic, spontaneous feeling of forgiveness because it just arrives. It just shows up. It literally shows up in the field. And it's because we are being reinformed differently. It's a different blueprint. When I talk about the blueprint, just to hammer this home, if we have a blueprint to make a house, and if there is a faulty set of instructions within that blueprint, no matter how many times we keep rebuilding that, we're going to keep rebuilding the same faulty house. It's the same in our body. If we have distortions in the biofield, particularly in the mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of our biofield, if there's a distortion there that hasn't been cleared, that impacts through the morphogenic field, it impacts the physical. So it becomes the template for how we rebuild cells, because we know we rebuild cells all the time. We've talked about that. Liver cells, gut cells, macula cells, all of these different things. Every year we have got literally like a brand new body. But if the architecture of it is still the same blueprint, we're going to still run into the same things, no matter how much we keep working on it. We have to clear the blueprint and inform it differently so that we can create something different physically. Through this experience, when we connect to this, we also can have this expanded connection. It's a felt sense of unity. So whether with source, nature, or collective fields, more than self-regulation, this is self-transcendence. So we don't just self-regulate, we can self-regulate with coherence, but we can have a very profound experience when we connect to this deeper aspect of truth that I think it lies within all of us. And this is more likely to cause sustained change. So unlike temporary relaxation that can happen from being immersed in a coherence field for a little bit of time, source coherence ripples into ongoing patterns of thought, feeling, and physiology. And part of this process is when you're being informed by that, this is where we start to pay attention to it, and we actually start to then make changes in how we think, how we feel, and actually the actions that we take in our world. That's where we really start to see the change happen. All right, everybody with me so far? Okay, so this is really the breakdown of still point scalar repatterning. There's sort of 5 key steps, and I'll go through each of these steps. And right at the moment, we are actually just past the first week of our 30-day study that we are doing with a group of about 50 participants, where we are actually going through this process together, and we're looking to see for changes that are taking place while we do it. I will actually encourage anybody that would like to be a part of maybe future studies to go to the website at inspirelife.earth after and sign up, and then I'll keep you informed when we move on to doing other studies as well. I think it's really great to be a part of a group experience like this. So the 4 steps are: create internal coherence, enter the still point, recharge your battery, listen, and then live the repatterning. So step 1, create internal coherence. When we are doing this process, first thing you're going to do is, if you are using, and you can do this with or without a biomodulator or transducer. Like I said, you can create coherence fields through consciousness, or you can create it through physics. The transducer and biomodulator gives us just a head start, and it sort of structures the field for us, so it's easier for us to kind of fall into this powerfully coherent field when we may be having troubles getting there on our own due to just stresses and emotions and physical discomfort and these types of things. So when we're doing it, turn on the transducer and start the process with it running. Now, if you are using the plus mode, you can do this on infinity. If you are doing the pro mode, it would be on, I believe it's 783 harmonics. But really, you could use any other one. You could even experiment with them and see what you feel more resonant with you. All of the frequencies that are generated through the biomodulator are all coherent. So you can't really go wrong with it. But these ones are a little bit more, I think, a good place to start. Now, the way that we start to do this, I think, has been well established, is doing a heart-focused breathing. So HeartMath has done a lot of research on heart-brain coherence and heart rate variability. It's a very easy process to go through. When we do this process, I'll walk you through this gently as we go into the stillness. So we first do this to really regulate the autonomic nervous system. It gets our awareness into the heart field, and it sets the stage for us to drop deeper into stillness. Step 2, we enter the still point. And as much as I'm going through a bit of a process, this isn't really so much of a process, in the sense of I don't want you to overthink it. You got to remember, when I'm talking about stillness, it doesn't mean you have to be in perfect posture or completely no movement. We are going to be still, but it really means non-interference. It's getting yourself out of the way. Get the head out of the way a little bit. Don't worry about whether you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. Just let your body start to rest and ease. Find a comfortable position. You could be sitting, you could be lying down. Just try not to fall asleep. Um, and let go of some of the control or performance. And it's funny, you'll find a lot of times in your head, like, oh God, I'm doing this wrong. I'm not doing this right. It's not going to work. It's like all of that is literally all of that is part of just incoherent messages that we have gotten accustomed to hearing. And we're going to be working on clearing those kind of things out. So you get into a position of comfort and you don't force stillness, you just invite it in. You got to remember, stillness is literally all around us. It's within us, it's around us. We're just inviting ourselves to join into it. Okay? Don't worry so much about the thoughts. You can't really stop thoughts. They will go, just don't engage in them. If you catch yourself when you're doing it, traveling along the thoughts and, going down the spiral with it, just catch yourself and kind of go, oh yeah, I'm just back to feeling again. Go back to just start over. Don't judge it. Don't get upset about it. It's natural. Everybody does it. So the first part of the heart-brain coherence usually is just about 5 minutes or so. It doesn't take very long to get into that state. And then we drop down into stillness and we stay in stillness. Usually in this study, we are doing it for about 20 minutes. Now, on your own, if you decide to practice, you can do whatever feels good for you. If you're not used to doing any kind of practice like this, 5 minutes. When we did the webinar last time, we just did 3 minutes of stillness. And you still feel a profound impact, especially in a group dynamic like this. But you can also go much longer. When I practice, I'll go anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour often, depending on just how it feels. And sometimes you sink right into it. Sometimes it's a day where it's harder to access it. And again, if you're showing up and doing it, you are doing it. Even if it doesn't feel like you are, if your intention is one of the strongest things that structures the field with information as well. When you have the intention to sit and connect, you are doing it. Even if you still feel a little bit of scattered, don't worry about it. Just keep doing it. After we've sat for the 20 minutes, when we do it, we won't do here today, we won't do quite 20 minutes. We'll do a shorter one, but we will sit for a little while. Once we come back out, then step 3 would be to recharge your body. Recharge your battery. So one of the things that is important that helps information from the field move throughout the body and share the message throughout is voltage. When cell voltage is high, that usually helps to structure our biowaters, and we can transmit the message better, where our body is just more receptive to the message. So openness of mind and then voltage in the body helps us move the message that we've connected to throughout the body. So recharge your battery. So if you have the biomodulator, this is where you can use the hand and foot pads, or you can put the body pads on the front and the back and just run the circuit, like an infinity circuit, and just recharge the battery, or whichever one you prefer to use on the Pro. And that's a great way to do that. If you don't have a biomodulator or transducer at the moment and you want to recharge your battery, get your socks and shoes off and get your feet on grass or on earth. Sit down on grass, get in nature, hug a tree. Any of that stuff, honestly, will start to recharge your battery. If you have a grounding mat, you can also sit on a grounding mat. You could even sit on a grounding mat while you're doing the process if you would like. That all helps to recharge the battery. Time in nature, I think everybody needs more of, because time in nature also helps us connect to our inner nature. It really does, because it is coherent and we are very much connected to nature. We actually need to constantly be reinformed by nature. It helps us get more in touch with ourselves and with our own source connection. So this is also really powerful. And if you ever do this process on your own, practice it actually out while you are in nature is even more powerful. Once you've recharged the battery, the next 2 steps I think are really paramount to this process. So remember when I said, when that coherent message comes in from that vis medicatrix naturae, that natural healing ability, you are being reinformed. Your biofield on the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual parts of you are all being reinformed with new information that actually has your highest good at heart. And it's unique to you. So now what we need to do is we need to pay attention to what comes up. So what can happen after you start to do this, especially when you start to do it regularly, you'll start to find different insights start to come up. You'll get intuitions. You might find that habits that you used to love doing just don't resonate anymore, and maybe new ones you're getting more interested in doing. You might get inklings to go and access something or to go somewhere or to do something. And you might find the same time you have more of an inkling to spend less time in other places that no longer feel like they serve you. This is really important because you will observe life as it responds to the field. You've repatterned the field. Now see what shows up for you. I mentioned this before when I did the webinar last, but my dad, I just saw this so clearly when my dad passed away last year, and I was there with him. Our whole family was there with him, right to his last breath at home with him. It was really beautiful to be able to all be there. But my dad was not a natural health kind of guy. My dad liked to have a scotch, and my dad um, enjoyed eating, like, he was a butcher. He enjoyed eating a lot of meat, and he enjoyed eating, and I'm not saying meat's bad, but I'm just saying his lifestyle, he enjoyed having a scotch and enjoyed having a steak. And so what was really unique was towards the end, and my dad actually even said to me about 3 days before he passed, he said, and he was kind of in and out, but it was really beautiful. He said, Jay, he goes, I saw that light they talk about. And he's just kind of looking off. And he said, what does that mean? And I said, I don't know, Dad. What do you think it means? And he said, because it means it's just about my time. And and what happened around that time, my dad had, over the course of this sort of period, it was particularly in the last 2 weeks of the time that we were there, but my dad was having these types of experiences, and he had no craving for alcohol at all, and he could not stand the sight of meat for him. And what was really interesting is my dad loved those two things. So for my dad, whatever was being reinformed through his field, it made him change his habits that he had had for almost his entire life. And I'm not saying those habits were necessarily good or bad, but they changed. New information was coming up that was allowing him to make a decision. And he even fought. He was like, I still want it, but I don't want it anymore. And he was really confused by it. But it's such an example of when you're being reinformed, what you used to know as normal may be different for you. And don't judge it, just be curious with it and explore it and see where it takes you. And then the last step, 5, is live the repatterning. And this is really important because it's one thing to hear the message, but then we need to actually bring it into our lives. It needs to be anchored in reality. Otherwise, we tend to go back to our old habitual unsupported patterns. So these new insights and intuitions, when they come in, check in with yourself, with your life. How do you start to implement them? And in what way feels resonant for you to be able to integrate them? Healing ultimately becomes embodied through action. Even when people have spontaneous healings, unless something changes in the way that they are often moving through their life, they tend to go back again to the old pattern and the old health changes. They go back to the same old health problems. So when people, and this came up when we did a whole series on where we talked to a lot of people that had near-death experiences and had profound changes in their life. And some of them maintained those. It was like it rippled through their body and it just stayed. They were new people. Other people had that, things changed, and then it went back to old patterns. So the idea is that when you're connecting to this, we ultimately need to bring more of you into the world, your true authentic self back into the world, not you shaped through incoherence. Okay, so is everybody still there? Because now, if we would like, we can actually do the process if you guys would like to. So, Alex, are you still there? Can you guys hear me?
We would love that, Jason. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, super. On this end, I just have my room and a lot of quiet. So, so everybody there, if you guys have your devices, okay, grab your devices if you've got them, and you can set them up whatever is comfortable for you. I think for this process, I like to put the transducer down around the root chakra, down between the legs. I just find it's easy for me if I'm sitting, and I can kind of clear all the polarities while I'm doing it as well. But as much as those are all other, I mean, all the stuff that you've learned over the course of this conference is all amazing information to integrate. What I am showing you is another way outside. I mean, you still clear your polarity, still recharge the battery, do all those different things. This is another way that I think we can just really amplify the benefits of these devices and the natural healing ability that we all have that is our divine right. So take this, turn it on, put it to either infinity mode or to 783 harmonics, and I just turn it right up to the max amount. For this purposes, if you don't feel like that feels good for you to be at the full amount, doesn't matter, bring it down a little bit. To me, this is all just increasing the power of the scalar field that we are going to be piggybacking off of. Okay, so take that and set it up so that you are in a nice, comfortable position. I just set a timer here, and what we'll probably do is I'll walk you through the first step where we will go through the heart-brain coherence. And then if you guys are up for it, I would say if you guys are up for it and everybody's ready, we could even do 10 minutes of pure stillness if you guys are feeling like it. I often find a lot of times as we do it, the more you get used to it, you actually want to stay longer and you feel like you just drop deeper and deeper often as you do it. But if you guys are up for it, I would say we'll do the first part, and then when I suggest that we go into stillness, I'll mute myself as well, and then we're just going to be staying in quiet, not moving, in stillness as best as we can for about 10 minutes. Does that sound doable, Alex?
Absolutely.
All right. How many people do we have there, Alex? Live.
We have about 30 here in the studio with us and many, many more, a couple hundred online as well.
Wonderful. And we had our second scalar repatterning group coherence study meeting yesterday, and we had a bit of a smaller group because I think several of you were at the conference here. So what's going to be great is we get to kind of redo it again with those of you here today. So this will kind of tie into even our study. All right. So get comfortable, find a nice comfy spot, and just on your own, just take a few slow, relaxing, deep breaths in through the nose and out through the nose. And with each out breath, just feel your body unwind and just sink into relaxation. And just take a few breaths on your own. Now, as you're taking your deep breaths in and out, just bring your awareness to the area of your heart. And if it feels comfortable for you, you can put your hand over the area of your heart, or just bring your awareness and visualize your heart with your in-breaths and your out-breaths. Take a few breaths doing that. Now visualize as if each in-breath you're breathing in through the heart, and with each out-breath you're breathing out through the heart. Take a few breaths doing that. Now allow yourself to bring up a memory. This could be of a specific situation or an environment, a loved one, a loved family pet, a child. Bring up a memory that fills you with a feeling of appreciation, of love, of joy or peacefulness. Allow yourself to connect to that memory and re-feel those feelings again. Allow that to penetrate through your whole body. And if there's any challenges in finding a memory, just keep breathing in and out through the heart. Take a few breaths doing that. Immerse yourself in that feeling. Now allow yourself to drop even deeper. Feel your body even more settled. If there's an area of your body that you would like to bring your awareness to, that's fine. And remember, don't look for stillness. Just allow yourself to rest into stillness. And make sure your hands are in a comfortable position, rested. And we're going to stay in this position, just breathing comfortably for about 10 minutes. I'm going to mute myself, and then I will bring you back in about 10 minutes. Okay, and slowly just bring your awareness to your hands and feet. And very gently just wiggle your fingers and your toes. And just take another deep breath in and out. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. So that's generally the process of the still point scalar repatterning. As you do it more and more, you start to get a feel for it. And what I would encourage everybody is, even as you go along your day to day, anything that comes up for you, any new messages, any new insights, anything that changes. I think when people do this process, it's actually really helpful to have a journal to even make notes, because often change is subtle a lot of times for people. You don't even realize what's changing until you make note of it and see where you were and then where you've become. So if you have a journal and you want to practice this, start making notes and see what comes up for you. And then how do you actively start to bring more of that, more of you into the world? What needs to change? What can you start to implement into your life? So, why does this matter so much now? Well, as probably you know, the world is in a coherence crisis. We're bombarded by exponentially high levels of incoherence. And the reality is whether we know it or not, our body is listening to the field and it's being impacted by the field. We're creating chemistry based on the field in many ways. And so what I'm showing you today is that we can choose to be a transmitter of coherence or chaos, depending on what we're doing. And I genuinely believe that we can create more of this, and that every person that starts to practice this type of connection back to something more meaningful and more real and more authentically you, and that we bring that out into the biofield and then we actively bring it out into the world, we not only change our own health and our own lives, but we become a beacon of that for other people in the world. And I think the more people that we have doing this type of stuff, the more we're going to see the changes that I think so many of us really deeply long for. So thank you very much. And I'll leave you with the final question. Are we just passive receivers of the world's incoherence, or can we become generators of coherence, of clarity, and of healing? Thank you very much.